Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. We've got everything going for us this time. Welcome back to the Divide by Zero show. I am your host, Jonathan Peterson, and today we're going to talk about some stuff that came out of Build 2020. I was really hoping to talk about this last Saturday. I just didn't end up feeling very well, so here we are. We're gonna do it this week. It's a little, feel like it's a little late. Most people have probably already gotten their highlights from somewhere else, but hey, this will be good practice for me doing the show. Next week I do have a guest scheduled to join. Got a guy, Jeff. He's going to be coming along, and hopefully, and we're going to talk about some technology in relation to COVID-19. And just some different things that have sprung about from this pandemic. And in case you're joining us in the future, we're still pretty much under lockdown. Things are starting to lift. COVID is a nasty virus that's pretty much affected everybody worldwide. So can't wait to get a haircut. Cannot wait. But yeah, so let's get into it. We've got a couple of different kinds of categories I want to cover. Build was all virtual this year, so there was no physical event really, and that made it kind of weird. There was a bunch of sessions. Some of them were as short as 15 minutes. Some of them went half an hour. Some of them were an hour. Hang on a second. Excuse me. There was even like a weird 15-minute session on yoga for some reason. To each his own, I guess. That just seemed a little bit weird. I don't think there are any device announcements this time, which is something I missed. Usually at Build they talk about updates to Surface or new Surface-related products. Surface Duo is a thing now. I think that's probably an offshoot of their Andromeda project. Was a dual folding screen kind of device that people have been talking about for a long time. So it's basically a dual screen Android device that folds on a hinge like that. Looks pretty neat. Looks like a couple of the Microsoft people have these devices that they can take home now, which means that it probably will be coming to consumers in a short period of time. So that'll be interesting to see. So from the Windows side of things, there's a couple of interesting things. WSL2, the Windows Linux subsystem, is coming out, and so there's some new things that come from that, including GPU support and Linux UI apps. So if you're not familiar with the Windows Linux subsystem, you can basically run Ubuntu or something like that inside of Windows, and it's kind of neat. Doesn't have any real application for me at this point, but that did get an update. It sounds pretty cool if you have to run Linux applications. So yeah. Let's see. Winget. Winget is a new tool that they're coming out with. You have to be in the Insider program, or you have to sideload it. It's a Windows Store app. Microsoft will forever be trying to get you to use the Windows Store. So it's basically like it's a Windows package manager. If you've ever used Chocolatey, it's very similar to that. They were talking about having some integration there, some kind of crossover, talking to, it sounded like they might talk to the Chocolatey package manager of some kind. So that will be interesting to see how that works. And from what I could tell, it's you could run it from the command line, and say, let's say you wanted to install Chrome. There's a package for that, so you just type in, I think it's winget. Is it just winget? Yep. Yeah. So you would type in winget install and then whatever the package was. So it's on a GitHub repo, and people can put pull requests in there to add manifests, and there is a ton of packages already out there, like, again, Chrome, there's FileZilla, there's a bunch of other tools like 7-zip, and just kind of the works. So what would be, I think, even more interesting to see coming out of that is the Scott Hanselman and the guest he was talking with during build about this. It almost sounded like their goal for it was, if you had to set up a new developer machine, that you could essentially install, use winget to install like your full suite of software, assuming it was available from their repositories. So that's really interesting to me. If you start a new job, you get a new issued laptop or something, or a desktop. It'd be really cool if you could winget install and then pull from like a predefined list that you set up and say, I want to install VS Code and 7-zip and Chrome and the works. And so that'd be kind of nice if it just bullet list through those and try to install them. I'm not entirely sure if that's already a feature. I couldn't find any other mentions to it beyond Scott Hanselman talking about it. Do encourage you to go watch that particular video. You can go to mybuild.microsoft.com, search for Scott Hanselman, and his keynote talks are always good, always enjoyable. And so he talked about several of things that I'm going to talk about now with you. So that was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of that. Power Toys is, I think they 1.0'd that now, and so it provides power users extra things. So one of the two things that they really kind of featured in build in regards to Power Toys, and that was a new run launcher, they called it. And basically is kind of like Mac Spotlight. It's been compared to, I don't use Mac products, but it's been compared to that. So hopefully that means something to somebody out there. But it'd be similar in Windows to like the Windows key plus Q or the run box. Win plus R will give you those things. And I mean, you do that in Windows 10, you can say something like, Chrome, and it'll search through the index of your installed apps and documents and whatever else Windows thinks is relevant to that search. So this is going to be kind of similar, except it's going to show a box in the middle of your screen, and you can type things into that. You can use winget from that launcher, so you can press the shortcut key and do winget install and whatever package you wanted to install. But it's also like a quick launch for applications. So again, if you wanted to run Chrome, you could hit the shortcut keys, type in Chrome, and hit enter. And so it was pretty nice. I tried it out on one of my development machines, and it seemed to work pretty well. I used the second feature that they were talking about with Power Toys, and that was a keyboard shortcut rebinding. And so this lets you, as you might guess, rebind keyboard shortcuts. And so I actually rebound the Win plus R and Win plus Q to that new launcher. And so if I'm looking for something I don't typically have pinned to the taskbar, I usually do Win plus Q, and that's probably one of the fastest ways in Windows to find something that you've got installed. So I rebound that to run the launcher. By default, the launcher comes with the shortcut of Alt Space, but I use that for something else, so it was really convenient to be able to rebind that shortcut to do something else, or really not do that and replace a couple of other Windows shortcut keys. So that was really cool. I looking forward to that becoming a little more robust. You do have to have PowerToys installed, and it runs in the system tray. So it's kind of unfortunate that you have to add extra resources somewhere and have a program running for that. But yeah, it was a nice enough feature to leave on for the time being. So I think that about does it for the Windows announcements. There was probably other stuff that I missed. I didn't have a chance to watch Build in its entirety just because of my work schedule, but try to catch most of the highlights here. So GitHub had a couple of new things. If you don't know, GitHub was bought out by Microsoft, so Microsoft is responsible for new developments there. And they're doing something called Code Spaces. It's currently in a private preview on GitHub, but you can sign up for that if you want to check it out. I mean, mostly what you'll be checking out is the waiting list, but when you do get into that, it's going to be interesting to see how well that works, especially if they keep working on it and trying to make it a little more of a mature product. It seemed to work. This is something else that Scott Hansman and one of his other guests was talking about in his keynote. It seemed to work pretty well. It was a little bit sluggish, but for what it's trying to do, I think it's manageable at this point. And basically, it's like Visual Studio Code in your browser. It's sort of similar to StackBlitz. I mentioned that last episode. We talked about StackBlitz a little bit. But this is going to be a new button on your GitHub repos, and you can hit code spaces or code and run or something like that. It'll spin up this code space for you, and if you have dependencies, the particular piece in Scott's keynote was talking about, I'm pretty sure it was like a Docker container, and so it stood all of this stuff up for you and basically was Visual Studio Code in your browser. And so it pulled straight from the repo all of your code there. If you sign in and synchronize your VS Code settings, you can do that from here as well. And within a couple of seconds, it'll pull all those settings in for you. So if you've got a particular theme you use in VS Code, it'll show up in the code spaces. If you've got plugins, it'll show up there as well. One thing that I think is a leg up over StackBlitz in this case is the ability to manage your pull request and create pull requests from your changes. It was one thing I was talking about when I was talking about StackBlitz last time, was in StackBlitz you can pull in a repository and you can work from there in StackBlitz. However, you couldn't pull or push back into it. And so it was kind of, it was nice if you wanted to check out something and play around with it, but then you had to like download it to do anything beyond that. So this code spaces, again, I think is kind of a leg up on that, is that you'll be able to push back into the repository from that. And so one of the things that I think is going to be very useful from code spaces then is if you brought your laptop, or maybe brought the wrong laptop and needed to work on something, you could do that. If you're sitting in an airport or a coffee shop or something like that, set up a code space and do your thing while you're waiting, or enjoying some coffee or tea or whatever it is, and then be able to actually push back into that repo and make pull requests, etc. So that, I think that's going to be really, really interesting. There's also Visual Studio code spaces that's going to be very similar, but I think it's going to be more about Azure. That was also in a preview and wasn't able to see too much into that either. So that might be interesting for, especially the hooks into Azure DevOps instead of GitHub. GitHub now offers free private repositories. Previously, you had to pay for that, but now you can get private repos in GitHub for free. And there's still going to be some enterprise class things, something you might want to continue paying for. Like I think they were talking about like security features and some of those other things you wouldn't get from a non-enterprise account. But that's neat. I usually keep my private repos in Azure DevOps because you can, have unlimited private repos there as well. So that's an interesting feature for people who don't want to or don't use Azure DevOps. Yeah, I think that'll do it for GitHub. Well, sort of relatedly, in the world of Azure, one thing that I noticed there was the Azure static web apps. So if you're familiar with Azure hosting at all, you might have used the app services. This is for static sites, going to be like Angular or something like even Blazor, probably Blazor, WASM apps, or just plain HTML, JavaScript, CSS. And so those will be free. And there's a couple other things that were integrated into it. You can read up on that if you want. Currently you have to connect your Azure account and your GitHub account, which the aspect of connecting it wasn't what was weird to me. The weird thing to me was that was the only way that you could use these. They have to connect to a GitHub repo. The nice thing about that is if you pushed into the repo, it would kind of automatically publish for you, and there's probably settings on that, but you couldn't pull it from Azure DevOps, which again seems a little bit weird that you're using one Azure product and you can't connect it to another Azure product. I don't, that's kind of mind-boggling to me. I did ask the Azure and Azure DevOps teams if that was coming in the future, but haven't heard anything yet about that. So I'd be surprised if it didn't. So hopefully that's coming. But it seems like it's nice if you wanted to develop an Angular application or Blazor or something like that. and didn't want to pay for the app services, that you could use the static web apps. Looks like it also was plugging into Azure Functions if you wanted to use that as an API backend. Azure Functions, I think, cost, they're either free or they cost like a extremely small amount when they're not running. So if you have like a low usage website, that might be something you could do there. They mentioned something that they're calling Project Reunion, and that's basically Microsoft's goal to sort of unify the Win32 and UWP APIs together. So if you're not familiar with those exact terms, Win32 apps are going to be your basic applications most of the time in Windows 10. So Chrome, Firefox, Office, those are all going to be Win32 apps. The WP apps are like kind of more modern attempt at applications and use very similar to WPF, and using XAML for their kind of creation. But the problem always was that there was the UWP apps were kind of sandboxed, and so they didn't have access to everything, which in some cases, of course, is a good thing. But also we're missing several of the Win32 APIs, and just when I tried UWP when they were first announcing it was kind of a pain to use. So one of their first components under this Project Reunion is WinUI 3 Preview 1, and the goal of that is to provide a unified UI framework across the C++, WPF, WinForms, UWP apps, and to try to help bring a modern UI to those applications. So that's interesting, and looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. Might make me want to do some Windows apps. I usually do web development, so be interesting to see how that kind of comes together. Speaking of reunions, .NET is changing again. If you're a developer and you thought naming things was hard, take a look at how Microsoft has done .NET Framework, because they're terrible at naming things apparently. You used to have .NET Framework, and the last one there I think was 4.7.6. And then came along .NET Core, which meant to break away from some of the legacy .NET Framework stuff they've been carrying around for 1,000 years, it seems like, and lightening that load. .NET Core is also cross-platform, and probably if you're creating any new apps, that's what you're going to do it in, is .NET Core. And so .NET 5 is coming. They're aiming for a release in November of 2020, and they're dropping .NET Framework, and they're dropping the .NET Core as a naming convention. So it's just going to be .NET 5, and they're going to bring everything together under that name. So you're going to be able to target the same kind of cross-platform functionality you get with .NET Core, and also sounds like Xamarin's going to get folded in there as well. So Xamarin is the cross-platform, native-ish Android and iOS development there, along with like Xamarin Mono kind of thing. So all that's coming into .NET 5. They're trying to make fill in some of the gaps, I think, with that, and just kind of how strange. .NET Standard, I think, is also folding into this. So their .NET Standard came about when you wanted to be able to have APIs that worked across .NET Core and .NET Framework. So that's going to be. I think there's some good stuff that's going to come out of that. There might be some bad stuff. Hopefully, they don't carry all the baggage from .NET Framework that people don't really use anymore or something. So hopefully it won't bog down what is currently .NET Core. So it'll be it'll be interesting to see what becomes of that as well. Blazor is coming into some good maturity now. They've got authentication and stuff built into it now, and a lot of stuff that was missing from Blazor when they first announced it. And if you're not familiar with Blazor, that's Microsoft's sort of answer to single page applications. So it's going to be similar to something like Angular or React, except that most of your code is going to be in C# instead of JavaScript. So I think my not so humble opinion is going to be that your .NET shops, your .NET development teams, at some point are probably going to desire and crave what Blazor offers. I think that it's going to provide less of a barrier to onboarding a new developer, especially someone who has C# background, because you don't also have to teach them, or they don't already have to know, the concepts surrounding Angular or React or whatever your JavaScript poison of choice is. It's pretty much C#. You can talk between C# and JavaScript because Blazor and C# won't be able to do everything. I don't know if it'll ever be able to do everything, but there is an interop in between those two, and you can actually call C# functions from JavaScript code, and you can call JavaScript code from C#. I've actually been playing around with that lately, and there's still a learning curve to it for sure, but like I said, it's definitely in better shape than it was before. So the Blazor WASM or WebAssembly is actually released now, and so you can build these single page applications with Blazor that doesn't require a server or API necessarily. You can still do the Blazor server apps as well, and so there's a Blazor server component and there's a Blazor kind of front end component to that as well. And so like I said, that's reaching much more maturity than there was before. Let's see, just looking at my notes here, those were probably the main things that I really wanted to talk about. Was kind of hoping to show some clips of code spaces depending on how much time I had left. Because like I said, I couldn't get into the demo or the preview with that before I started doing that. So let me see. Let me see if I can pull some of that in. I did not actually expect that I would have time for this. Just 1 second here. Window capture. This is what you get for trying to change your OBS live. Okay, I think that's gonna be good enough. So I'm gonna flip over to the Scott Hanselman's keynote on that the code spaces. So I think it'll be worth watching some or all of that. Just that segment's a couple of minutes long. And I think it'll be a little easier to talk about. Again, just I wasn't sure if I was gonna really want to play that section in its entirety. I really tried to see if I could pull down the video and cut it a little bit, but I found the download button. I was looking for that earlier this morning and I couldn't see a way to download the video. Oh, that's because that's weird. Well, I feel better now. There wasn't. I opened a guest Chrome window and pulled up the video, and now there's a download button. But when I was signed into it before, there wasn't. So, all right then, let's transition over there, and oh, we're not gonna get any audio from that, are we? We get
install.
Can someone in the chat tell me if you can hear this? Nope. Okay. Well, that's not very nice. Why don't we have...
Oh,
Still no.
uninstall. Oh my god, there's a lot of this is a little bit much. I don't really have this kind of time, but even worse.
I'm assuming you still could not hear that. Ah.
This is real typical.
There we go. That's strange. just a little bit here.
Okay. Get the source. There's a lot of. Oh, and install. Oh my goodness. This is a lot of. This is a little bit much. I don't really have this kind of time. But
so what they're talking about here is they've pulled up together a GitHub repo, and he was looking at basically your typical GitHub repo of how to build and get this stuff going, and what you have to do to when you download the repo and all the other stuff that you have to do to actually get in there and play with stuff. And so Scott's complaining about the effort it takes to do this. So let me go back over to the audio from the video.
This is real typical, though.
It's very typical, but with code spaces, we've got a much easier way now.
Oh,
so
okay.
Scroll all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
You've got that green code button, so click on it, and then open in code space.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So here, yeah, we are opening your code space or building it for you, right? And obviously, building a code space takes a.
Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit just because that takes several seconds to do, but basically it sat there and spun up for a few seconds, and so this is the result now. Is they have this repo pulled up, and it's inside the browser as Visual Studio Code. So how cool is that? I think that's pretty nifty. So let's play this for a little bit more here.
A little bit of time, but far less than all that setup.
Certainly different between taking 7 hours to set up a machine from scratch. We're here complaining about this took like 20 seconds to set up an entire environment.
Right. This should.
Oh, here we go.
Yep. We remember your GitHub login, so all you have to do is select it.
This is the first
and
time.
Replace local.
All right. Cool.
And then it's syncing it.
Whoa! Hey,
So his themes and his extensions just pulled in from this. So I'm going to skip a little bit more ahead and see if I can find. So here they're talking about pull request. Let me back up just a little bit.
We've got many extensions here. Go to GitHub.
All right.
And if you open up all,
okay,
you'll see I put a little surprise in there for you with Dependabot, because I know you love Dependabot.
I freaking love Dependabot. Dependabot is such a joy.
Yeah. Could you tell me a little bit more about what it does? To be honest, I put it in there because I know you love it, but I'd love to hear more.
Dependabot is like a person that works for you, that watches your dependencies, and it will go and do pull requests. So like here, Dependabot went and noticed that the MongoDB dependency bumped from one version to another. And what I love about it is it will go and pull the release notes out. It'll basically do an inclusive, I want everything from this version to that version, and it copy pastes it in. You can even go and see each individual commit between these two versions. And it's lovely. And then you can go and do, and look, I'm doing.
And so, as you can see, you can do a pull request and merge it from here. And so that was kind of the main thing that they were really talking about that I thought was interesting. You can see that you've got the syntax highlighting. I mean, it's Visual Studio Code in your browser, running off of repo. I think that's pretty cool. He also talked about like all of his shortcut keys were there, and there's one. Let's see if we can get past all this. Oop, a little too far. Oh, here we go.
Your local browser. So if you go ahead and open that.
Wait, literally open localhost?
Yep. Go ahead and follow that link.
That seemed impossible. Whoa. Connecting to the forwarded port.
And then you'll get to see the Olive tracker for real. So unfortunately, Olive hasn't really been to the Midwest or the East Coast. So
here we
why
go.
don't we go over to Seattle?
There's Olive.
Yes.
Oh, look.
There she is. And if you click on any of them, you'll get a cute little photo.
So what he just did there is they ran the code that they were looking at, and trying to go back. You can see that it says debugger attached and running at this localhost address. And so what they've done is they've actually set up port forwarding between code spaces and your browser. And so that's what you saw
Code space.
Localhost
here.
And actually forward that.
So that's what this is doing here. It's forwarding on whatever's running in the debugger to your browser. So that those code spaces are going to be quite interesting, especially I think as time goes on and they're able to do more with that. So yeah, that's what we got. I'm sure there were things that I missed, but like I said, my work schedule didn't allow me to watch build in its entirety. And again, the sessions were a little bit strange. Some of them were talking about just really short 15-minute sessions. There was one thing that I just remembered I skipped in my notes. Let's find. So C# 9 is coming. Unfortunately, they've decided that it should, so far anyway, that it's only going to be in .NET 5. So previously, you've just kind of had to upgrade your projects to support the latest version of .NET if you're the C# language features if you wanted it. And the compiler would pretty much figure that out for you. So this is only available in .NET 5, from what I understand. So hopefully the upgrade path from .NET Core to .NET 5 won't be a huge pain. If you've migrated stuff from .NET Framework to .NET Core, lots of stuff has changed. And so it wasn't something that you could just do in an afternoon most of the time. You basically had to start a new project and start pulling stuff over and find out what was broken between what you used in .NET Framework and what you used in .NET Core. So hopefully the upgrade path from Core to .NET 5 is going to be as smooth as upgrading from, let's say, .NET Core 3 to 3.1 or something along those lines. So some new features that are coming into C# 9 is I'm sorry, I got distracted. You'll be able to, usually when you set up like a property or something, let's say it's a list of string or something, normally you have to declare the access, you have to declare what type it is, so list string, give it a name, and then in order for it to not be null, you usually have to do equals new list of string. So C#9 is going to allow you to skip the new list of string, and it's just going to be new, like new and then the parentheses. So that's nice. That's one less thing that you have to type. It just kind of infers that what you're newing up based on the type of the property. We've also got some new null checking. You can put an exclamation point in your list of parameters on a method, and it will automatically do null checking on that parameter for you, and throw an argument exception if it's null. So you could have previously you could have had a not null attribute in front of it, which lets IntelliSense know that this parameter shouldn't be null. But if you're using something like a string, there's no checking automatically for you. So there is now, you just have to do string and something like first name and then pound, or the exclamation point rather. After that, it'll automatically do that null checking for you. So that's cool. Pattern matching improvements. So it's just going to simplify some of the things that you do there. Data classes are a new thing, so that's kind of like a record. It's an immutable object, so you can't change it once you've initialized it. And there's some other stuff going on there with that. So that's pretty neat. There's one. What's it? The type conditionals. So in C# you could use a ternary expression, which is a boolean, a question mark, and then if the boolean is true, we do this, and followed by a colon, and otherwise do this thing over here instead. So if the example I've got here in front of me is something like if you were making some kind of check to see whether you're pulling from a file system or you're pulling from in memory, or some other kind of stream. Previously, or in C#8 and below, you would have to do something like convert. You would have to cast the memory string and a file stream into that root stream type. So you no longer have to do that in C#9, provided that both sides of the ternary expression can be cast to the same thing. So that's nice. I think that's I love all these things that reduce the amount of stuff that you have to type. Let's see. You're going to be able to change the return type of inherited classes. So a method inside of a class you're inheriting, normally if you did an override on that, you would have to return the exact same thing. So if you had a method that returned a string that was marked virtual in your parent class, any of the classes you inherited from also had to return a string from that. But that's no longer the case in C#9. You can override that, and you could change that to an integer if you wanted to. The other feature that they were promoting was these top-level statements in like a console app. So instead of all the normal stuff that you would see in a console app, you could literally do using system console.writeline hello world. They're making this sound like the main reason they're doing that is to improve readability for people like beginners and instructors, showing students how to do code, but trying not to get into some of the nitty gritty of why all this other stuff was there. I personally think that it's even more confusing that way, because outside of that very specific example, teaching someone how to do code in C#, you instantly have to start teaching them these other behaviors that would have been there already. So even though that's a reduction of code you have to type, it's, I don't know, not a huge fan of that feature, but hey, whatever. I was really hoping that C# 9 would introduce multiple inheritance in classes, but that doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. I also asked Microsoft about doing that to see if they had that in the works, but from what I can tell, they don't. At least I haven't got an answer on that. So that is a feature that lots of people have been asking for a long time. And if you ever have to do, base classes or class sharing across, if you're building entities or something like that, that would be a very welcome feature, but I guess it's not in the cards for C# 9 or C# yet. So that would be one of my wish list items for C# 9. Okay, I think I actually did go over all my notes this time and not forget one. So hopefully you learned some stuff about Build and what is coming and what is readily available. You can check out the Build 2020 site at mybuild.microsoft.com and watch the sessions there. Again, I would encourage you to at least watch Hanselman's keynote, because he's got several things that were part of that session. There's a couple other. I think if you search for Hanselman, there's another one that he did, and I can't remember what the specific title on that was now, but. Anyway, so hopefully we will be COVID free next year for Build, and we'll be seeing a little bit more of their normal the normal routine for Build. People are saying that at least for this virtual event there was no flights, no hotels, nothing like that. So I guess that's one benefit of doing Build. And if you would like to send me to Build next year, I would happily accept that. So give my people a call. We'll talk. I think that's going to do it this time. Again, next time, hopefully next week, we are going to have a guest with us to talk about COVID and technology and the interesting and sometimes creepy things that are going on with that. And hopefully that'll be a good talk for us. Be sure to like and subscribe and share and all that other good stuff, please. If you have a topic that you think might be interesting to talk about, let me know that as well. If you're watching on Twitch, these are also on YouTube, and by extension, if you're watching on YouTube, it's also on Twitch. YouTube keeps the videos for a lot longer than Twitch does, so if you want to go back, you can do that. I think that's going to be it for this time. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you